if I traded it all, if I gave it all.
Welcome back. This is going to be very interesting for everybody. My next guest is Dennis Reiber. I thought about that right. Okay, and he is a presentation coordinator for Convention of States. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Carol.
Tell us a little bit about what Convention of the States and Article V, or is that 5?
Article 5.
What is it?
Actually, it's kind of a two-part question. The first part of the Convention of States, the organization itself, is actually a grassroots organization that started back in 2013, and it was co-founded by Mark Meckler, who is the president of the Citizens for Self-Government, and Mike Ferris, who is a constitutional lawyer, chancellor of the Patrick Henry College, and has also been one of the few lawyers to successfully argue Article 5 before the Supreme Court.
I'm going to throw you off here for a minute, and it's going to make you feel a little bit more comfortable, too. But the reason why I want to ask you this question, why are you here today? I want to know what you want them to know about.
My main purpose today is, as I go across the state and talk to people in different presentations, we strive to, I guess you'd call, educate people, because a lot of folks from our civics class back years ago found out that Congress can make and propose amendments through the Article 5. Well, what our teachers didn't tell us, and what a lot of people don't know now, is there's a second part to that that allows the state legislatures to initiate the same process when it comes to amending proposals for the Constitution.
And how did we find out about this? What's the best thing for us to do?
Well, you can either go to the website, which is www.conventionofstates.com. Look us up there. There's a ton of information. You can sign a petition to volunteer, to get involved. We're always looking for different volunteers for different positions, media, state directors, things like that. This is really an important issue right now, given everything that is happening in the country. Economics, welfare, healthcare, everything. Our country has gotten so far away from what our founders originally designed through the misinterpretation over the years of the Supreme Court rulings and Congress just trying to amass more power, that it's not the limited government that our founding fathers designed, nor is it what they wanted. They would be absolutely appalled if they saw the way our government was running right now.
Sure would. Now, that website is conventionofstates.com. You're looking for volunteers. You're looking for people to go up there and to sign some of the petitions.
Right. We're looking for people to sign the petitions, to tell their state legislatures, hey, this is important. This is the only way we are going to get anything accomplished as far as reining in the power and the abuse of the federal government, because Washington, D.C. will not self-correct. They will never propose amendments that are going to reduce their authority, reduce their power, and they're certainly not going to make any amendments to the Constitution that are going to allow the Supreme Court or any courts in that frame to reduce any of their power and authority. I mean, every day we see that states are losing more of their representative authority that they were given. They were given this by the Constitution. Each article in the Constitution lays down specifically what each branch of government does, and it specifically says that whatever power the federal government does not actually have enumerated is reserved to the states, and was not reserved to the states is given to the people of this country.
Well, what is the difference between a convention of states and a constitutional convention?
That's a great question. And a lot of people that I talk to in my presentations or just day-to-day have a tendency to confuse the two, when in fact they are totally different, both in method and scope. And without getting into the real nuts and bolts, I'll try to keep it fairly quick. A constitutional convention is just what it says. It's a convention that's brought together to create a constitution for a legislative body. The only constitutional convention we have ever had was the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. And that's because all the delegates were brought together with the purpose of putting a document together to run the country. Okay? A lot of people say that the delegates got off track. They didn't do what they were supposed to. It became a runaway convention. Well, it didn't, because if you look at the historical process, the Articles of Confederation, which is what we were operating with before the Constitution, didn't allow for any kind of broadening or not so much broadening, but it didn't allow for any kind of conventions or people to come together to do this. So, and it really didn't work. The Articles of Confederation were a nightmare. So the delegates came together, and their express purpose was to design a document that would run the government. So they did that. Now, an Article 5 Convention of States is totally different, and this is where people get confused. And the Supreme Court itself has even said that an Article 5 Convention of States is, in fact, a convention of states because the states control it. A convention of states doesn't make a constitution. What it does is it proposes amendments for the Constitution. All they are doing is they are substituting the initiating part of making an amendment to the Constitution. Like I said, we all know that Congress does this. They've been doing it for years. In fact, there's been over 10,000 proposals for amendments from Constitution over the years, and we've only approved 27 of them.
That's amazing.
I know.
I thought you were going to say something different, but that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a huge number. People, they look at me like, are you kidding me?
Really?
So a convention gets together, and they're meeting under three basic topics, and this is where the application that these states are putting in really comes into play. There's three areas. It's imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government. We want to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And the third one is to impose term limits on federal officials, those being congressmen and judges. Well, if you look at the broadness of everything that's happening, anything you want to pick is going to fall basically within those three areas. So the convention gets together, and using these three areas as a guideline, they will propose however many amendments they feel are necessary to do that. They'll work out the language and get done what they need to. Once 26 states have agreed on the text of the proposed amendment, then it goes to the states to ratification, just like the normal process.
Is that how they state makes an application for the Convention of States? Is the same thing?
It's very similar. I mean, the application for this, it starts out, you have to have a sponsor in the legislature. Mm-hmm. And then once it's sponsored, in fact, last year, we've actually went through the House of Representatives last year, passed it absolutely beautifully. And then it got stalled in the Senate, which we can probably touch on in a minute. But once it gets approved, it goes through committee, and then it's approved at the House of Representatives, approved at the Senate. Once it's done, then it goes on to Washington, and it becomes part of the 34 that we need as a total number of states applying to call a convention of states.
Check the website out. It is conventionofstates.com. Okay, so you've won in the House the last 2 years. Why haven't you finished, and why hasn't the Senate passed our resolution?
Well, that's a really good question, and there's some interesting parts to it. We actually had sufficient votes last year to do this in the Senate. Like I said, it passed the House of Representatives. We were in the Senate. We were ready to go. It looks like we had enough. And Senator Andy Biggs, who is vehemently opposed to this entire process. In fact, he's went on record right after the GOP party said, yes, we want to support this, we want you to do this. He's went on record to say, I'll bury the COS. He absolutely disdains, I'll bury it, it'll never come up again. So using his power, he kind of negatively influenced some of the senators that were going to support this. So it never made it to the floor. He held that along with other bills on autism, government control, and schools till the very last minute to get them to committees to where there was no time to do any kind of a vote. The Senate recessed. That was it. Done deal. Now we have to start the process all over again this year. But what we've managed to do in this past year is we've went from a volunteer base of about 500 people last year to over 7,000 people this year. So we feel that we have got a significant portion of people that are aware of this problem now to get a hold of their state senators, their state representatives, says, hey, this is a good idea. We need to do it. Make sure it happens.
Go to the website. It is conventionofstates.com. So I want to ask you real quickly, why should the listeners care about Article 5 and COS?
Oh, wow. I don't know if we've got quite enough time, but I'll try to be real quick about it.
I'm going to let you say it.
Okay. Basically, there's four areas. Washington's out of control, and they're never going to relinquish that control. But there's four areas of abuse. You've got a spending and debt crisis of over $18 trillion. That's $220,000 per family, $30,000 more than the average median household. That means they owe a ton of money before they even get out of bed in the morning. And that doesn't even cover the $127 trillion unfunded liabilities. Number two is the regulatory crisis. Right? The Founding Fathers said anything that the states could handle, the federal government doesn't need to get involved in. Well, the federal government has thrown that off to the side. We are overregulated, complex, it's conflicting. People don't know what the heck's going on. Congressional tax and state sovereignty, we've got federal grants, mandates, and they take over the decision-making process. Everybody's getting together to take responsibility and power from the states.
Check them out. They want you to volunteer. They also want you to sign some of those petitions and get involved. It is conventionofstates.com.